Sharing the screen as well once again. Yeah. So यहाँ पे you can see it's the most simplest and the easiest way to forecast a company's revenue, right? Being there on the screen for you. ठीक है, अब usually what happens in such kind of methods, you basically take into account the company's past year revenues. You have the company's past year revenues, and basis upon that, you tend to forecast the company's revenues. Okay, so for example, if you see in this case, we shall be preparing the actual financial model of the company as well. But before we prepare the actual financial model, so these things have been discussed on the website as well. But just to make you understand is you need to know about the different methods to forecast the company's revenue, right? The most simplest and the most easiest way which people tend to use in the market, which might not be appropriate every time, right? Just make notice of this line, which might not be appropriate every time, is the straight line method or the historical average method. Most simplest method, 99% of the freshers are using this method to forecast the company's revenue, right? Now the thing is, in this method, you basically shall be using the company's past revenues. So for example, if you see the first tab on the screen, right, it has given you some company's historical revenues, right? Some hypothetical historical numbers just to make you understand. Also we'll be doing it upon the real numbers as well. हम real numbers पर भी ये calculation करेंगे कि how to forecast the company's revenue. So if you see these past year numbers, hypothetical numbers basis upon revenues, 10,000, 12,000, 14,500. So previous 3 years historical revenue has been given to you, and you need to forecast the company's future revenues, or you need to forecast the company's revenues for next 5 years based upon the past 3 year revenues. Then how will you do that? The most simplest method is simply taking the average, right? So for example, if we see from year 1 to year 2, right? So this blue part is the historical part, which we have in already, which we might have extracted from the company's annual report, further from the profit and loss statement. And the yellow part or the mustard part is something that we are forecasting based upon the past year's data, the most simplest method to forecast. So if we see historically in year 1, where the revenue had been 10,000, so sales being a proxy for revenue, right? So this I'm assuming as total sales. Sales being a proxy of revenue, this is your total net sales, your total sales minus sales return, right? It might have taken into account some other income component also, but assume as of this particular point of time, it is your net revenue or total sales. Sales being a proxy of revenue, just trying to make things simpler for you to understand initially. ठीक है, तो कंपनी की यहाँ पे रेवेन्यूज दी गई हैं. यू हैव ईयर 1 का रेवेन्यू, यू हैव ईयर 2 का रेवेन्यू, एंड यू हैव ईयर 3 का रेवेन्यू. ईयर 1 का रेवेन्यू इज 10,000, ईयर 2 का इट इज 12,000, ईयर 3 का इट इज 14,500. So simply we can get to know by a simple percentage increase formula or a percentage increase method, that is by how much percentage the revenue or the sales in year 2 has risen or increased over year 1. So simply I've used the percentage change method. मैंने कुछ नहीं करा. I've simply taken 12,000 divided by 10,000 minus 1. It is simply a percentage change formula. I want to know on a simple average method or a simple percentage change method, that is how much my revenue has grown in year 2 as compared to year 1. So I can simply do a 12,000 minus 10,000 divided by 10,000. My final value minus my beginning value divided by my beginning value, right? If I just try to do a cross multiplication on this formula, I get the same number. It gives me D7 minus C7 divided by C7. That's it. So मैंने वही करा है. I've taken the final number, that is year 2, 12,000, divided by the year 1 का number, that's your previous number, 10,000 minus 1. So it tells me the revenue or sales being a proxy for revenue has grown by 20% in year 2 on a base of year 1. Similarly, by the same method, a formula, I can calculate for the year 3 as well. Now I can see in year 3, my sales has grown by 20% again. 14,400 divided by 12,000 minus 1. So again, my sales have grown by 20%, right? So here it's very simple to understand. I'm getting 20%, 20%, right, for both the years. Now, in the real world, you might not find companies having a sales growth of consistent 20%. Companies are being known for inconsistency. Sometimes the sales might grow by 20%. In the other year, the sales might grow by 30%. In the third year, the sales might grow by just 18% or 15% or 12%. The graph might be cyclical or the graph might be quite haphazard. राइट. इट माइट नॉट बी अ लीनियर प्रोग्रेशन और अ स्ट्रेट लाइन कि अगर 20% है देन आगे भी 20 से ही बढ़ रहा है, या 20 है देन 25 हो गया, देन 26 हो गया, देन 30 हो गया. इट माइट ऑल्सो कम डाउन. इट माइट ऑल्सो कम डाउन. So we need to understand how we're going to do for such scenarios as well. Though it does not make much of a difference, we can use the same method as well. But just to make you understand initially कि जो केस आपके सामने ऑन द स्क्रीन, उस केस में हम कैसे करेंगे. ठीक है. एंड देन आई कम टू दोज चेंज इन परसेंटेजेस ऑल्सो कि when it's 18% or 20% or 25% or 30% per se. So यहाँ पे what I have done, since it's a 20% number, the average of these years, it will drastically come out to be 20% only, right? If the growth rate every year over the past 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years has been 20%, my average growth rate, it comes out to be 20% only, correct? So I've grown my third year ka revenue with 20%. That is 14,400 into 1 plus 20%. Simple logic, simple method. And I have made it as an absolute referencing because 20% is fixed. I need to grow each year by 20%, right? So I've just pressed an F4 key on my laptop. I press the F4 key, this E8 cell, which is the 20% growth rate, it automatically turns out to be an absolute referencing. And that I need to do because I need to be smart. Because if I just drag in all the numbers, because anyways, I need to increase all these numbers by 20% only. Because 20% is my average number. करेक्ट. मैं तो 20 से इंक्रीज करूंगा. तो अगर मैं इसको एब्सोल्यूट एब्सोल्यूट रेफरेंसिंग नहीं दूंगा, इफ आई डू नॉट गिव इट एज एन एब्सोल्यूट रेफरेंसिंग, इफ आई डू नॉट फिक्स दिस सेल, in the next cell it will take F8 and not E8 as my growth rate, and my F8 is a blank cell, it is 0%, right? So I need to grow all my revenues for next 5 years at the rate of 20% only, right? And that is the reason I fixed it to 20%. Correct. Now it is the most simplest way to do it. Like even if you see for the next cell for the fifth year, again it's the previous revenue into 1 plus 20%, and I go on till my eighth year, till my next forecasted fifth year. That is your seventh year into 1 plus 20%. The most simplest way to do it. But I might get a scenario where this number is 17% and this number is 16%, or there might be like 4 to 5 numbers, right? In one year the company might grow at a 20%, in other year the company has grown by 15% in terms of top line. Top line is called as sales, where bottom line is the profit, being PAT, right? Your profit after tax, PAT, is called as bottom line in terms of financial terminologies, and your revenue is your top line. Okay, the basic difference. In second year it turns out to be मान लो 15%, and this is the percentage increase in rate, right? The percentage increase in rate. ठीक है. Maybe I'll just put in just numbers only just for the simplicity. Then it turns out to be how much? 13 हो गया किसी ईयर में. किसी ईयर में the growth rate in percentage had been around 25%. 25%. I can change everything to a percentage. It is already, but right. So I've changed things to percentage. Maybe I can just remove. मेरे पास नंबर कम है तभी मैं बाय 100 डिवाइड नहीं कर रहा, एज्यूमिंगली. So I can simply just take an average. I can simply just use an average function in Excel. So my average growth rate, it comes out to be 18.25%. Then I can increase my revenue by 18.25% every year till my forecasted fifth year by 18.25%. The most simplest way to do it. Now, the situation can also incur or occur, like for example, you might have some one-time gains or losses, right? Some one-off gains and losses in terms of increase in revenue. मान लो then there has been some kind of a COVID-19 kind of a scenario, right? So basically, what happened during that year was the revenues suddenly declined for many companies. The revenues suddenly declined for many companies. तो अगर कोई कंपनी 20% से ग्रो कर रही थी या 30% से ग्रो कर रही थी, इट केम डाउन टू 2% ड्रास्टिकली, टू 3% ड्रास्टिकली. And once after that 6 months or 8 months of that COVID problem, once the revenue started to rise once again, it was a revenge, right? It was a revenge growth in sales. So drastically from a lower number as 2% or 3%, the revenues grew as high as 30%, 40%, 50%, right? So this shows the abnormalities. It can happen कि वो 20% के बाद सीधा वो 2% हो गया, and then 2% के बाद it grew at 40%, right? So that shows an abnormal number. 20 से 15 है, 15 से 16 है, then 25 है, it's seemingly fine. But when it comes down from 20% to 2%, it really shows either there has been some black swan event in the economy. There might be a depression, there might be a COVID-19 kind of a situation, there might be some kind of a global depression kind of stuff like which has impacted that particular economy or a company, right? And when it booms back from as low as 2% to as high as 40%, 50%, it indicates something really good has happened. From a depression kind of a scenario, it has completely transformed to a boom economy or a booming company, right? So these two numbers seem to be extraordinary. These are not the ordinary numbers, right? But whenever we are trying to forecast the company's revenues, right? I'll repeat my point. Whenever we are trying to forecast a company's revenues, we only take the ordinary years or the ordinary numbers. We have to ignore the extraordinary numbers to make it palatable, to make it consistent. Because यहाँ पे I took this number, my number now comes out to be 21.75%, which again exhibits a very high number. A company which has come down due to some cyclical reasons or due to some global economical reasons, right, to 2%. That doesn't mean the company is bad. The company has come down because of the global reasons or the economical reasons, and every company has been down into that phase, right? And that company won't be giving you a 2% sales growth forever. It is just a 1 year basis or just for a 6 month basis. But whenever the boom comes into place, the 40% year on year number, that 40% won't come every year as well. It will stabilize to some average number, to some like 15%, 10%, 12% number, maybe. The same happened with the IT sector. During the COVID 19 pandemic, when everyone was working from home, the model shifted to completely online. The IT services company or the IT company's revenue grew by more than 100%, 200%, 80% per se. But now they have come down to a higher single digit number. And many companies are degrowing in the Indian IT sector, especially for large cap. Because every company will not grow forever at a 100% rate. Because the economy has to mean revert. Economy has to follow the concept of mean reversion. They cannot always grow at a 40% rate, at a 100% rate. Also, a good company will not always grow at just a 2% rate. It has to average out. So whenever we are trying to calculate the average growth rate, we can ignore these 2 years. We can completely ignore these 2 years. And if we ignore these 2 years, right, if we completely ignore these 2 years, which have been extraordinary in terms of different things, and just take the ordinary years, our revenue comes down to be 22.50%. Again, it is higher than 21.75% ideally, because still I've taken a higher number here. Because every company in the real sense, it doesn't grow by 25%, 30% on top line every year. On an average, the companies only grow by 8 to 10%, a higher single digit number or a lower double digit number in early teens. That's it. They will not grow every year by 20%, 30% per se. So we have to negate the impact. We have to negate the impact of those years in which the companies have grown at a very higher rate or a very lower negligible rate, to remove the impacts, to have a decent number, to have a clear cut number, and to make our valuation assumptions much more closer to the actual value, which might happen after 5 years or 6 years per se, depending upon the years on which we are trying to create the valuation model. हम कितने साल का बना रहे हैं, 5 साल का बना रहे हैं, 10 साल का बना रहे हैं, 7 साल का बना रहे हैं. Usually we should make it for 5 to 10 years. 5 years is the best tenure, because market changes, company changes after every 2 or 3 years, and the financial model inputs also changes, right? So that is one thing, the most simplest method to do it. Then the second method you talk about is a moving average method. Now the moving average method is something which you might not be using on daily basis, because either you shall be using the historical method or the regression method. But sometimes you have to show to your management or to your clients certain basic things on a quarterly basis, right? Because itna to we know, the company tend to declare the results on yearly basis and quarterly basis. You have the Q on Q results and you have the year on year results. And then we have all those commentaries in the market that which sector is doing good, which market cap is doing good, a large cap is doing good, a small cap is doing good, a mid cap is doing good, or the broader market is doing good in terms of Nifty 500. So Nifty 500, we call this as a broader market. So whenever you hear this term on a CNBC or on Google या कहीं भी social media platform में, broader market has even good results. So broader market is Nifty 500, because Nifty 500 has large cap stocks also, mid cap stocks also, and small cap stocks also. Top 100 stocks, your Nifty 50 and the Nifty next 50 are the top 100 stocks, right? Your large caps are Nifty next 50, your mega caps are Nifty 50, right? But as the broader overview, your top 100 companies, your top 100 companies are your large cap companies. From 101th company to 250th company, from 101th company, 101 company से लेकर 250th company तक you have the mid cap companies. So you have 150 mid cap companies. And from the 250th company, 250th company, 251st company, that is 251 to 500, you have the small cap companies. So you have a set of 100 large cap companies, 150 mid cap companies, and 250 small cap companies as a part of the broader universe, broader index, broader benchmark, that is Nifty 500. If you add 100 large cap plus 150 mid cap plus 250 small cap, 100 plus 150 plus 250, it comes out to be 500. And that comprises your broader index Nifty 500, which has the weightage. The largest weightage is to large caps. Approximately 72% weightage is given to large caps as of now. Some 18% weightage is given to your mid caps, right? And some 9 to 10% weightage is given to small caps. And because small caps have a smaller size, mid caps have a much larger size as compared to small caps, and large caps are mega caps. They have a very big size. But now at times we have seen the intensity by which these companies have grown, be it a mid cap and small cap. Your SEBI definition has gone out of the roof. As per SEBI, जब हम कुछ साल पहले, 4 साल पहले, 5 साल पहले, लाइक जब हम सेबी के बुक्स में पढ़ते थे, अपने कोर्सेज में पढ़ते थे, राइट, वहाँ पे लिखा होता था अ कंपनी लेस देन अ 5,000 crore मार्केट कैप इज अ स्मॉल कैप कंपनी. A company having a market cap from 5,000 crores to 20,000 crores is a mid cap company. And a company having a market cap or a market size of more than 20,000 crore is large cap company. But now this definition has completely changed. Your small cap companies are trading at a valuation more than 20,000 crores. That is, your small cap companies have now started to trade at a size of mid cap companies, where mid cap companies are now trading at a size of large cap companies. Your large cap companies either have remained the same or they're trading at the size of mega cap companies. Even this definition does not work into the current scenario as of now because of their size, their scale of operations, and the intensity and the volume by which these companies have grown, right? So that is one thing. So coming back to this, so on the screen you can clearly see there are some quarterly numbers, right? A company's के revenue दी हुई है on a quarterly basis, right? Q1 Q2 एक्चुअल है, राइट, एंड जहां हम फोरकास्ट कर रहे हैं वो फोरकास्टेड है, ठीक है. सो अगर हम, इफ यू सी दीज रेवेन्यूज ऑन अ क्वार्टरली बेसिस, दे सीम टू बी क्वाइट फ्लक्चुएटिंग. They are not following a linear trend. They aren't even following a geometrical or an exponential trend. Sometimes the numbers are high, sometimes the number becomes too low, and then they come back to a very high number. The trend is not, I would say, simple to understand because numbers are quite haphazard. And that is why I really recommend people to look at year on year numbers for companies and not Q on Q numbers. We tend to make a lot of judgment for companies based upon Q on Q numbers. Q on Q numbers will be fluctuating. Q on Q numbers will be volatile. So we cannot judge a company, or we cannot make our I would say a kind of a framework or a decision to invest into a particular company based upon the Q on Q revenues, right? Year on year revenue should be taken into account while making an investment decision. For trading, you guys can do anything. I do not encourage trading, but for trading, anything can be looked into, right? But for investment purposes, you need to look at year on year earning growth, year on year top line growth, right? Be in terms of revenue per se. So if I try to smoothen these numbers, because if I take out a moving average, here MA starts from moving average, my numbers can be smoothened out, right? They can become much more linear. They can become much more appealing. I can make people understand that what has been the trend. So अगर मैं 2 quarters का average ले लूँ, ठीक है, so here I have taken the average of 2 quarters. Then again I take the average of 2 quarters. I've just taken the simple moving average. Okay, and why do I call it as a moving average? Because I'm taking an average of every 2 quarter, first two, then second and third, then third and fourth, then fourth and fifth. So if I do till here, my numbers are much more streamlined. But if I do it for a 4 quarter, my 4 quarter is 1 year. अगर मैं 1 साल के बेसिस पे एवरेज निकाल रहा हूँ, my 4 quarter average with something to be 1 year, my numbers are like much more smoothened. See, my numbers are much more smoothened. So it says that taking average of the quarters, four quarters makes the number much more smoother. And that is why Q on Q should not be looked into. Year on year is something that needs to be looked into. Now, how can we forecast this? Right, we know it already. कि हमको पता है कि हम कैसे कर सकते हैं फोरकास्ट, तो मैं इस पे तो आऊंगा नहीं, राइट, बिकॉज ये भी चीज़ यहाँ पे करी गई है, बट आई टेल यू सम हाउ हियर टू फोरकास्ट द नंबर्स, बिकॉज दीज आर बिगेस्ट ऑन अ क्वार्टरली ग्रोथ रेट एंड नॉट ईयरली ग्रोथ रेट. This file has been shared with you. I'll share again with you today. ठीक है, no, and solved file, the file which will be solved, I'll share that with you, so that you guys can easily try to understand the formula. ठीक है. अब I've simply calculated something which is your compounded quarterly growth rate, CQGR, right? We all know what is CAGR, compounded annual growth rate. We also know about the formula for CAGR. मैंने पेग रेशियो में CAGR का फॉर्मूला सिखाया था जब हम पी रेशियो की बात कर रहे थे, पीजी रेशियो की बात कर रहे थे. दैट्स योर फाइनल वैल्यू divided by the beginning value whole to the power of 1 by a time period minus 1, 1 by n minus 1. एंड वही चीज़ यहाँ पे करी है. माई फाइनल वैल्यू इज 35K, इनिशियल वैल्यू हैड बीन 32K. मैंने वही यहाँ पे करा है 35K, दैट्स माई G17, divided by 32K to the power of 1 by 8. And why 8? Because 8 quarters. From this quarter to this quarter, it has been 8 quarters. Okay, because I'm trying to calculate something which is the compounded annual quarterly rate, not the annual rate, right? मैं quarterly growth rate निकालने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ. -1, ये फॉर्मूला है, right? Once you practice this multiple times, then only you will understand what is the formula, and that you have to do once the session is over. ठीक है. I got a 0.8% compounded quarterly growth rate, and इसी परसेंटेज से I increased it. मेरी सारी क्वार्टरली रेवेन्यूज आर ग्रोइंग बाय दिस परसेंटेज, राइट. सी दिस previous number into 1 plus compounded quarterly growth rate. That's it. ठीक है. So sometimes you need to represent the numbers in such a way in front of your management and clients. We're talking about the quarterly numbers, right? Sometimes a researcher or an analyst who wants to spend more time, he goes deep dive into understanding these numbers by heart. So year on year numbers he has, but he also tries to go deep down into trying to understand the quarterly numbers as well. ठीक है. Seasonality in business and volume and price is something which is very simple. ठीक है. It is more linked to these two methods only. ठीक है. तो मैं इसको इतना बात नहीं करूंगा. These things you can learn from my modules, right? कुछ ज़्यादा इसमें कोई ताबड़तोड़ चीज़ नहीं है कि I need to make you understand. It's linked to these two methods only. But this method is regression, very popularly used. Very popularly used. This method of regression, right? So regression is very commonly used in the market. ठीक है. बहुत मार्केट में कॉमनली यूज होता है रिग्रेशन. बहुत इसके एप्लीकेशंस हैं. फॉर ऑल ऑफ दोज हु स्टिल डू नॉट नो हाउ टू यूज रिग्रेशन, डू नॉट वरी फॉर दैट, राइट. इस चीज़ को सीखना इंपॉर्टेंट है. देर आर कपल ऑफ मॉड्यूल्स ऑल्सो, राइट. देर आर कपल ऑफ मॉड्यूल्स ऑल्सो, राइट, ऑन द वेबसाइट that will teach you, correct, that how do we need to use this method of regression in isolation. But just to make you understand, for this sense, like just to try to make you understand how do we forecast the company's revenues based upon regression, right? So it is, so if we talk about the regression concept, it talks about the relationship between a dependent variable and an independent variable. A regression, it always tries to establish a relationship between dependent variable and independent variable. Now, independent variable is something which is not dependent upon anything as of this particular point of time, as of this particular case or question. But a dependent variable is something which is dependent upon the independent variable. If something changes in the independent variable, it will reflect upon the dependent variable, or there might be some changes into the dependent variable. So that is the concept of regression. Okay. So what basically happens is इफ यू जस्ट ट्राई टू टॉक अबाउट द इक्वेशन ऑफ रिग्रेशन, जब भी हम रिग्रेशन की इक्वेशन के बारे में बात करते हैं, और सिंपली आई जस्ट नोट इट डाउन, वाई टू टाइप इट। हाँ, इट सेज ए और वाई इज इक्वल टू ए प्लस बी एक्स। वाई इज इक्वल टू ए प्लस बी एक्स। Now, here what happens is, if we talk about a y, right? Y is your dependent variable because it is dependent upon this equation, right? ठीक है? X is your independent variable. B is your beta, right? We have talked about what is beta. I won't be discussing that in detail. We have in detail talked about different types of beta also. And A is your intercept, right? A is your intercept. It's also called as your alpha, the exit return you make over the benchmark. So A is your alpha, B is your beta, X is your independent variable, and Y is your dependent variable because it is dependent upon this equation. Let's not go deep dive because it's not a session upon statistics, right? Statistics के point of view से सीखना है, it is already present in the modules. Watch that. ठीक है, सो यहाँ पे if we see we have a company, 12 महीने का डेटा दिया हुआ है, they're spending itna on ads and itna they're making in revenues. And this method can also be used in terms of startup companies having no proper profits, loss making companies. So this method is very popularly used, right? So you have this month, you have the ad spend, you have the revenues, correct? You have the total ad spent, you have the total revenues, you have the average ad spent, simple average का फॉर्मूला मैंने लिया है, ठीक है, एंड यू हैव द एवरेज रेवेन्यू। यहाँ पे यू हैव द टोटल एड स्पेंड एंड यू हैव द टोटल रेवेन्यू, ठीक है। अब द थिंग इज, फर्स्टली मैं क्या करता हूँ, एक ग्राफ बना लेता हूँ एक। अब ये ग्राफ मैंने कैसे बनाया है, मैंने कुछ भी नहीं करा। आई हैव सिंपली सेलेक्टेड दिस कॉलम, आई वेंट टू इंसर्ट एंड आई क्लिक्ड ऑन स्कैटर प्लॉट, राइट? सो हियर यू सी समथिंग विच इज, यहाँ पे देखो बहुत सारे चार्ट्स आएंगे, राइट? सो यू हैव दिस मल्टीपल ऑप्शंस फॉर चार्ट्स। तो मैंने ये स्कैटर प्लॉट बना लिया है यहाँ से, दिस स्कैटर प्लॉट। आई जस्ट क्लिक्ड ऑन दैट एंड द स्टार्ट केम इन ऑटोमेटिकली। इट्स नो रॉकेट साइंस, इट्स नो रॉकेट साइंस। मैंने बस ये डेटा किया सेलेक्ट एंड आई जस्ट क्लिक्ड अपॉन स्कैटर प्लॉट, दिस होल चार्ट केम अप, ठीक है। अब यू जस्ट ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड द चार्ट। ये लाइन अगर आप देखोगे ना, ये लाइन मैंने नहीं डाली, यू जस्ट डू अ क्लिक ऑन द चार्ट और यू डू अ क्लिक ऑन द डॉट्स, ठीक है। अगर मैं नो लाइन कर दूंगा, ठीक है, देन लाइन चली जाएगी। अगर मैं सॉलिड लाइन पे क्लिक करूंगा, ये लाइन आ जाएगी। सो इट्स अ ट्रेंड लाइन, राइट? यू माइट हैव हर्ड अबाउट अ ट्रेंड लाइन। अ ट्रेंड line is very popularly used in case of trading or in terms of investing also sometimes, because you tend to see the trend of a particular stock or a company or the company's top line or bottom line, right? तो यहाँ पे अगर मैं ट्रेंड देखूंगा, इट्स अ राइजिंग ट्रेंड। तो स्कैटर प्लॉट्स आसपास हैं, बट ओवरऑल इट्स अ राइजिंग ट्रेंड, ठीक है। तो इतना मुझे पता चल रहा है वाया दिस ग्राफ, the revenues are exhibiting a rising trend. That is, you are increasing your ad spend, and basis upon the increase in ad spend, the company's revenues are also rising. So listen to this point very carefully. Based upon ad spend, my revenues are rising. Correct? Based upon my ad spend, my revenues are rising. Correct? So I can say that my revenues are dependent upon my ad spend. Just try to understand these things very carefully. What happens in case of startup companies, we have to market. You have to do Instagram marketing, right? You have to do some online, offline marketing. Market नहीं करोगे, right? Then business नहीं आएगा, right? And revenue भी नहीं आएगी. So your revenue is dependent upon the ad spend. Now here ignore the thing कि कंपनी को प्रॉफिट हो रहा है चाहे लॉस हो रहा है। स्टार्टिंग में कंपनी को लॉस ही हो रहा होगा, बिकॉज द एड स्पेंड, द मार्केटिंग एक्सपेंडिचर विल बी मच मोर हायर than the revenue, right? But initially, your revenue is based upon ad spend. The how much advertisement you do, the probability of your increase in revenue rises, right? So your revenue is basically your dependent variable, and ad spend is your independent variable. In this case, a variable which is independent in this case can be a dependent variable in some other scenario. Like for example, if I talk about a budget, in case of a budget, my ad spend is a dependent variable because जितना budget company के पास पैसा होगा, उसके basis पे the company can do ad spend, जितना पैसा the company can raise from market or take loan by equity or debt, so that becomes a independent variable. And in that case, my ad spend becomes a dependent variable. But as of now, in this case, my revenues are based upon my ad spend. So my revenue is a dependent variable on ad spend, and my ad spend becomes an independent variable. Now, the question that might come into place is equation कैसे आई है यहाँ पे ये how this equation has come into place, right? Y is equal to a plus bx जो मैं बोल रहा था यहाँ पे bx plus a हो गया है. This is your intercept, this one is your beta, and next is your dependent variable, independent variable, sorry. ठीक है, तो अगर मैं स्टार्ट को राइट में प्लॉट भी करना चाहूँ तो मेरे पास बहुत सारे ऑप्शंस आ रहे हैं, राइट? बहुत सारी चीज़ें मैं कर सकता हूँ. ठीक है, सो आई जस्ट सिंपली इफ आई जस्ट डू फॉर्मेट प्लॉट एरिया भी करोगे, right? So there you can change the color. You have these multiple options. Border and all you can change, right? Just close it. Just reduce the size of it. Hmm. ये सब colors वगैरह हो गए. You have these text options. You can add the text, but इन सब चीज़ों का ज़्यादा यूज़ नहीं है. As such you see, थोड़ा बस इन वाले चार्ट्स में यूज़ नहीं रहेगा. इन वाले चार्ट्स में ज़्यादा यूज़ नहीं रहेगा, right? So this is basically how you can try to arrange all of these things, right? टेक्स्ट ऑप्शंस हो गया, ट्रेंड ऑप्शंस हो गया, टेक्स्ट आउटलाइन हमने समझ लिया. अभी इन सब चीज़ों की बाकी चीज़ों का यू नीड नॉट वरी अबाउट. देन व्हाट हैपेंस ऑन दिस ट्रेंड लाइन, यहाँ पर you get this option of display equation on chart. You click on that and this equation comes into place. If you remove it goes off. Display r square. R square is the square of the coefficient of correlation. ये मैंने एक मॉड्यूल में बात करी है. आर स्क्वायर इज समथिंग ऑल्सो लाइक समथिंग लाइक विच इज ऑल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट. सो आर स्क्वायर बेसिकली टेल्स यू that how much of the risk is being explained by the market risk. So it basically tells us that how much is your systematic risk, which is your non-diversifiable risk. So in this case, we can see 93% can be a systematic risk as per this scenario. But यहाँ पे इतना वो like important नहीं होगा. Like when we talk about the market returns of a particular stock, ठीक है, वहाँ पे this R square plays a major role. ठीक है, यहाँ पे इतना नहीं, तो इसको हम अभी के लिए I just ignore it. So you have this equation on the chart. ठीक है. अब if I want to forecast my revenues based upon these ad spends, ठीक है, मैंने एक randomly ad spend ले लिए हैं. I want to know कि based upon different ad spends how much revenue my company makes. So if my ad spend had been 150, if my ad spend had been 200, if my ad spend had been 250, then how much revenue I'm making? I simply used a forecast function in Excel. It's an inbuilt function on Excel. मैंने खुद से नहीं बनाया है. You do n is equal to forecast. The first variable it says x, right? So it talks about your independent variable. It talks about your independent variable. So my independent variable is this. So basically it talks about what number I need to put in, ideally the 150. Then यहाँ पे it talks about y, right? So here I've put in my d column. So that's my dependent variable, right? Y is my dependent variable, correct? And all the numbers are revenue, and revenue is my dependent variable. So I've selected the column for dependent variable. Comma, it says known x. X is my independent variable. Ad spent is my independent variable. So I've selected all the numbers of dependent variable and all the variables of independent set. X is the 150 based upon which I want to calculate my future revenue. I did an enter. I got the answer as 23,668. And same I can do for this. My X, like which is the number on which I want to forecast my revenue, is 200. Dependent variable and dependent variable. I did this. सेम मैंने यहाँ पे करा। अब दिस इज समथिंग विच इज नॉट मैंडेटरी। दिस टेबल जो नीचे है, दैट यूजिंग इक्वेशन इज नॉट मैंडेटरी, बट इफ आई नीड टू नो इफ माई आंसर्स आर करेक्ट और रॉन्ग, सही कर रहा हूँ या गलत कर रहा हूँ, बिकॉज इक्वेशन के बेसिस पर भी आई कैन फोरकास्ट माई रेवेन्यू। वेन यू डू सच सम्स normally on a calculative way in your BCom exam, in your MBA exam, you solve such things manually. साइड में कैलकुलेटर होता है, यू कैलकुलेट द नंबर्स बट यू राइट द इक्वेशन एंड सॉल्व थिंग्स। है तो अगर उसके बेसिस पे आई वांट टू कैलकुलेट माय नंबर, बिकॉज माय इक्वेशन इज माय bread and butter, right? The equation for regression is my bread and butter. If whatever final output comes via my equation, that should match with my forecasted function in Excel. If that's not matching, something is wrong. But in 99.999% of cases, it will match. So ये इक्वेशन मैंने यूज करी, जो जो इक्वेशन यहाँ पर ही दी गई थी, दैट इज 156.15x प्लस टू। अबे 156.15 कैसे आया, 245.6 कैसे आया, यू नीड नॉट नो, इट्स अ पार्ट ऑफ रिग्रेशन। दैट इज दे हैव क्रिएटेड एन इक्वेशन आउट ऑफ दिस स्कैटर्ड प्लॉट एंड ट्रेंड लाइन। हाउ दे हैव क्रिएटेड दैट, इट्स नॉट इन योर सिलेबस, यू नीड नॉट नो दैट। एक्सेल इज डूइंग इट ऑटोमेटिकली फॉर यू। ठीक है। अब मैंने क्या करा है इसमें, 156.15, राइट, 156.15 इंटू एक्स, एक्स इज माई एड स्पेंड इंटू 150, बिकॉज एक्स का नंबर मुझे चाहिए था, प्लस 245.65 तो कांस्टेंट रहना ही है, 245.65 मैंने ऐड कर दिया। आई गॉट द आंसर एज 23,668, इट्स मैच विद दिस। सेम आई डिड विद दिस, my 200 into 156.15, here 200 is my x into 156.15 plus 245.65. I got the answer as 31,476, which matches with this. Again with 250, right? So 250 into 156.15 plus 245.65, ये दोनों numbers कहाँ से आए हैं, ये दोनों numbers you need not worry about. This your Excel has given you automatically. You need to work smartly. In real life में you do not use pen and paper to calculate stuff. ठीक है। दिस इज हाउ यू कैन टॉक अबाउट अ स्टार्टअप कंपनीज रेवेन्यू। लिस्टेड कंपनी में भी यूज कर सकते हो, but also for startup companies which do their research internally that how much revenue the company can grow under different circumstances, what needs to be that spent. And after this, the best method to forecast a company's revenue is management commentaries or conference calls. You won't be having access to all the conference calls, but you get notes, you get summarized versions. चैट जीपीटी में भी लाइक यू टाइप अ कंपनीज नेम से कि मुझे तुम कॉन्फ्रेंस कॉल दे दो, हिंदी में लिखो, इंग्लिश में लिखो, गुजराती में लिखो, यू विल गेट द कॉन्फ्रेंस कॉल का पीडीएफ. So mostly in all conference call, you get a revenue guidance, and the management says that they're expecting to increase the company's revenue, or they expect an increase in company's revenue by 10% or 12%. Increase the last number by 10% or 12%. Ignore regression then. Ignore historical average method then. Ignore the moving average method then. There are different analysts, but a company CEO, a company's CFOs, a company's own analysts are the best research analyst of their company. अगर वो बोल रहे हैं कि 12-13% से कंपनी की रेवेन्यू ग्रो होगी, चाहे पिछले साल 2% से ग्रो हुई हो, चाहे पिछले साल से 40% पे ग्रो हुई हो, या एवरेज आउट 15% से ग्रो हो रहा हो, उसको 12% पे ग्रो कर दो नेक्स्ट 5 ईयर के लिए. That is the best and the most simplest way to do it, and the much more realistic way, non-calculative way. And notes में mention कर दो तो कि the management has guided that the revenue of the company will grow by 12% for next 5 years. That's it. और क्या करना है? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? I'll share this file. I'll share this file, and we'll connect back in the subsequent session for more things. Hello. Okay then. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.